The crash shook the entire desert like an earthquake. Sand flew everywhere as something massive slammed into the ground near the old mechanic shop. Jake Martinez was under the hood of a broken truck when the impact nearly knocked him off his feet. Tools scattered across the concrete floor as he stumbled outside to see what had happened. What he found changed his life forever. A crater the size of a small house stretched before him, still smoking from whatever had fallen from the sky. At the center lay something that made Jake's mind struggle to understand what he was seeing. It looked like a dragon from the old stories his grandmother used to tell, but this creature was unlike anything from fairy tales. The dragon's scales shimmered with an otherworldly blue-green color that seemed to shift in the desert sunlight. Each scale was as large as Jake's hand and appeared to be made of some kind of metal that pulsed with faint energy. The creature was enormous, easily 40 feet from nose to tail, with wings that could have covered his entire garage when spread wide. But the dragon wasn't moving. Jake approached carefully, his work boots crunching on the crystallized sand around the crater. As he got closer, he could see that the magnificent creature was badly injured. Deep gashes ran along its sides, and one of its wings was twisted at an unnatural angle. Strange, glowing blue liquid seeped from several wounds, pooling in the sand beneath the dragon's massive form. The dragon's breathing was shallow and labored. Its eyes were closed, but Jake could see they were different from any animal he'd ever encountered. Even unconscious, there was something intelligent about this creature's face, something that spoke of wisdom and ancient knowledge. Jake had been fixing machines his whole life. He understood engines, circuits, and mechanical systems better than most people understood their own families. But this dragon seemed to be part machine and part living creature. Along its neck and spine, he could see what looked like technological implants seamlessly integrated with the organic scales. Cables and wiring ran beneath the surface of its skin, visible through translucent patches. The strangest thing was the collar around the dragon's neck. It was made of the same shimmering metal as the scales, but it pulsed with angry red light instead of the peaceful blue glow of the dragon's natural energy. The collar was clearly causing pain. Jake could see where it had burned into the creature's flesh, leaving angry marks that refused to heal. As Jake studied the collar more closely, he noticed symbols and writing that definitely weren't from Earth. The letters seemed to move and shift when he wasn't looking directly at them, and they gave him a headache if he stared too long. Whatever this collar was, it wasn't just jewelry. It was some kind of control device, and it was slowly killing the dragon. Jake had always been a man who helped injured animals. He'd rescued countless stray cats and dogs over the years, nursing them back to health in his garage. But this was different. This creature was clearly not from his world, and helping it might bring dangers he couldn't imagine. Still, he couldn't just walk away. The dragon's breathing was getting weaker. If Jake was going to do something, it had to be now. He ran back to his garage and gathered everything he thought might help. Medical supplies from his first aid kit, tools that might work on the strange technology, and a tarp large enough to provide some shade for the massive creature. When he returned to the crater, the dragon's eyes were open. Jake froze as those ancient, intelligent eyes fixed on him. They were the color of deep ocean water, with flecks of silver that seemed to swirl like galaxies. There was no aggression in that gaze, only pain and something that looked like surprise. The dragon had probably never seen a human before, just as Jake had never seen a dragon. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other across the damaged sand. Jake could feel the dragon's intelligence studying him, trying to understand what kind of creature had found it in this strange place. Slowly, carefully, Jake took a step forward, then another. The dragon didn't move to attack or defend itself. It simply watched as Jake approached with his supplies. When he knelt beside the massive head, close enough to touch those incredible scales, the dragon made a sound unlike anything Jake had ever heard. It was part growl, part mechanical hum, and somehow Jake understood it was trying to communicate. "Easy there, big guy," Jake said softly, the same tone he used with injured animals. I'm here to help. The dragon's eyes tracked Jake's movements as he carefully examined the wounds. Up close, the damage was even worse than he'd thought. The creature had been in some kind of battle before crashing here. Burn marks from energy weapons scorched its hide, and several of the technological implants were damaged or missing entirely. But the collar was the worst problem. It was actively draining the dragon's life force, converting the creature's natural energy into something else. Jake had seen similar technology in the military equipment he sometimes worked on, but this was far more advanced than anything humans had created. As Jake studied the collar, trying to figure out how to remove it, he noticed something else. High overhead, barely visible against the blue sky, were three dark shapes circling like vultures. At first, he thought they might be aircraft, but as they descended slightly, he could see they were ships of some kind. Alien ships. The dragon saw them too. Its whole body tensed, and that mechanical humming sound grew louder and more agitated. Whatever those ships were, the dragon was afraid of them. Jake got the impression they were connected to the collar, to the dragon's injuries, to everything that had happened. They're looking for you, aren't they? Jake murmured, not really expecting an answer. To his surprise, the dragon managed a weak nod. The ships were getting closer. Jake could hear the hum of their engines now, a sound that made his teeth ache. He had to make a decision quickly. He could leave the dragon here and hope the creatures in those ships would take care of their own kind, or he could try to help and risk getting caught in the middle of something far beyond his understanding. Jake looked into those ancient, intelligent eyes one more time and made his choice. Hold still, he told the dragon. This is going to hurt. Jake pulled out his most advanced diagnostic equipment, devices he used to interface with the computer systems in modern vehicles. The dragon's technology was incredibly advanced, but technology was technology. There had to be a way to understand it, to find a weakness in that collar. As he worked, connecting cables and running power through his portable units, the alien ships drew closer. The dragon watched the sky nervously while Jake fought to understand the collar's control system. The device was incredibly sophisticated, with layers of security and fail-safes that made military encryption look like a child's puzzle. But Jake had been breaking into locked systems his whole life. Every mechanic learned to bypass the security on expensive parts when cheaper solutions could save a customer thousands of dollars. This collar was just another locked system, even if it was more advanced than anything humans had built. The ships were close enough now that Jake could see their sleek, predatory design. They were definitely built for war, bristling with weapons that hummed with the same energy as the dragon's collar. As they approached, Jake's equipment started picking up communication signals between the ships and the collar. That was his way in. While the ships tried to re-establish control over their escaped prisoner, Jake piggybacked his own signal into their communication stream. It was like listening to a phone conversation while splicing into the wire, except the conversation was in an alien language and the wire was made of pure energy. The dragon's breathing was getting even weaker. Jake could see its natural blue glow fading as the collar drained more and more of its life force. He was running out of time. The ships would be here in minutes, and the dragon would be dead or recaptured. Jake's fingers flew over his equipment, tracing the collar's control pathways through his jury-rigged interface. There, a central processing node that controlled the power flow. If he could overload it, create a feedback loop that the collar systems couldn't handle, he might be able to burn out the control circuits. It was dangerous. If he got it wrong, the explosion could kill both him and the dragon. But if he did nothing, the dragon would die anyway, and Jake would probably end up as a prisoner on one of those alien ships. The lead ship was descending toward the crater now, its weapons powering up with an ominous whine. Jake could see figures moving inside the cockpit, but they were too far away to make out clearly. He had seconds left before they arrived. Jake took a deep breath and initiated the feedback loop. The collar erupted in sparks and smoke. The dragon convulsed as electricity coursed through the device, and for a terrifying moment Jake thought he'd killed the creature he was trying to save. Then, the red glow died completely, and the collar fell away from the dragon's neck in two smoking pieces. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The dragon's natural blue glow flared brighter than ever, and the creature's breathing steadied. Those intelligent eyes focused on Jake with what could only be described as gratitude. But there was no time to celebrate. The lead alien ship had seen the collar's destruction and was now accelerating toward them, weapons charging to firing levels. Jake could hear the high-pitched whine of energy building in their weapon systems. The dragon struggled to its feet, still weak from its ordeal, but no longer dying. It spread its damaged wings and looked down at Jake with an expression that clearly said, "Get on." Jake didn't hesitate. He committed himself to helping this creature, and now they were both in danger from whatever aliens had been torturing it. He grabbed his essential tools and climbed onto the dragon's back, finding handholds among the technological implants along its spine. The dragon launched itself into the air just as the first energy blast seared the ground where they'd been standing. Jake held on for dear life as they climbed steeply into the desert sky, the alien ships in pursuit. The dragon was still injured and couldn't fly at full speed, but it was fast enough to stay ahead of their attackers for now. As they flew over the endless desert, Jake could see more alien ships converging on their position from all directions. Whatever these creatures wanted with his dragon, they were willing to commit significant resources to get it back. The dragon was clearly more than just another member of their species. It was something special, something they couldn't afford to lose. Jake held tighter as the dragon banked sharply to avoid another volley of energy blasts. The ships were gaining on them, and the dragon's strength was fading fast. They needed somewhere to hide, somewhere the aliens couldn't follow. Jake knew just the place. "There!" he shouted over the wind, pointing toward a range of rocky hills on the horizon. "The old mine shafts. They go deep underground." The dragon seemed to understand, changing course toward the abandoned mining complex where Jake had played as a child. The tunnels went down for miles, deep enough that no scanner would be able to penetrate the rock. If they could reach the mines before the aliens caught them, they might have a chance to escape. But the alien ships were closing fast, and Jake could see more energy building in their weapon systems. This was going to be close. The dragon's wings folded tight against its body as they dove into the mine, shaft opening just seconds before the alien ships arrived overhead. Jake pressed himself flat against the dragon's back as they plummeted through darkness, trusting the creature's enhanced senses to navigate the narrow tunnel. They crash-landed on the sandy floor of a vast underground cavern, rolling and sliding until they came to rest against an old mining cart that had been abandoned decades ago. Jake tumbled off the dragon's back, his whole body aching from the wild ride, but alive. Above them, he could hear the alien ships circling the mine entrance like angry wasps. Their engines echoed down through the tunnels, but they didn't follow. Either they couldn't fit their ships into the narrow opening, or they were afraid of getting trapped underground. The dragon collapsed beside Jake, its breathing heavy but steady. In the dim light filtering down from the surface, Jake could see that several of its wounds had reopened during their escape. The blue glow from its scales was dimmer than before, and Jake realized the creature was running on pure willpower. "We need to get you patched up," Jake said, pulling a flashlight from his tool belt. The dragon's eyes followed the beam of light as Jake examined their surroundings. They were in one of the main excavation chambers, carved out of solid rock by machines that had worked here 50 years ago. Multiple tunnels branched off in all directions, leading deeper into the mountain. It was a perfect place to hide, but only if the dragon could heal enough to eventually fight back. Jake had brought some supplies from his garage, but nothing designed for treating wounds on a 40-foot alien dragon. He was going to have to improvise, using everything he'd learned about both medical treatment and mechanical repair. The dragon watched with curious intelligence as Jake spread out his tools and supplies. When Jake approached with antiseptic and bandages, the creature held perfectly still, seeming to understand that Jake was trying to help despite the pain. "This might sting a bit," Jake warned as he cleaned the worst of the energy burns. The dragon made that mechanical humming sound again, but softer this time. Jake was beginning to think it was the creature's way of communicating approval or gratitude. As he worked, he found himself talking to the dragon like he would to any patient. "Those ships up there, they're your own people, aren't they? The ones who put that collar on you." Jake carefully applied bandages to the deepest cuts. Question is, why would they want to control one of their own kind like that? The dragon's expression grew sad, and it made a different sound, lower and more mournful. Then, to Jake's amazement, the creature began to project images directly into his mind. Not words, but pictures and emotions that told a story more clearly than any language could. Jake saw flashes of the dragon's memories. A beautiful world of floating cities and crystal spires, where dragons like his companion lived in harmony with advanced technology. They were guardians of their civilization, protectors who used their natural abilities and enhanced technology to keep their people safe from threats across the galaxy. But something had gone wrong. Jake saw images of war, of the dragons being fitted with control collars and forced to fight against their will. Some kind of military coup had taken over the dragon's homeworld, turning the noble guardians into enslaved weapons. The dragon Jake had rescued was called Zara, and she had been one of the most powerful war dragons in their fleet. For years, she had been forced to attack innocent worlds, to burn cities, and destroy lives while the collar kept her trapped in her own body. The guilt and pain of those actions showed clearly in the memories she shared. But Zara had found a way to resist. During a battle near a distant planet, she had managed to overload her collar's control circuits just long enough to break free. She tried to escape, but the other enslaved dragons had been ordered to pursue her. The fight had damaged her badly, and she'd barely managed to reach Earth before crashing in the desert near Jake's garage. "They followed you here," Jake realized. "They need you back because you're too dangerous to leave free." Zara nodded sadly. The images she shared showed him how the collars worked, how they amplified a dragon's natural abilities while enslaving their minds. A free dragon could potentially liberate others, starting a rebellion that could free their entire species. But first, Zara needed to heal, and the alien ships weren't giving up easily. Jake could still hear them circling overhead, their engines creating a constant background hum. Occasionally, he heard the whine of energy weapons as they blasted at the mine entrance, trying to collapse the tunnels or force their quarry out into the open. "They're going to try to smoke us out," Jake said, "or maybe flood the tunnels with some kind of gas. We need to go deeper." Zara struggled to her feet, still weak but determined. Jake gathered his tools and supplies, and together they made their way through the network of abandoned tunnels. Jake used his flashlight to navigate, while Zara's enhanced senses detected air currents and structural stability. They found a perfect hiding spot 3 levels down in a natural cavern that the miners had broken into during excavation. Underground springs had created a small lake in the center of the space, and the sound of dripping water would mask any noise they made. More importantly, the cavern had multiple exit tunnels that led even deeper into the mountain. Jake set up a more permanent medical station using his flashlight and some emergency flares for lighting. As he continued treating Zara's wounds, he noticed something interesting about her injuries. The technological implants along her spine weren't just decorative or functional. They were self-repairing. Tiny mechanical components were slowly rebuilding damaged circuits and regrowing severed connections. It was like watching the world's most advanced 3D printer work on a microscopic level. Jake had never seen anything like it, but his mechanical mind immediately understood the principles involved. "Your technology integrates with your biology," he said wonderingly. "That's incredible. No wonder they wanted to control dragons instead of just building robots. You're living weapons that can repair and upgrade themselves." Zara's expression showed pride mixed with bitterness. She projected more images, showing Jake how young dragons were enhanced with technology as part of their natural development. It was meant to be a partnership between organic intelligence and mechanical capability, allowing dragons to serve as the ultimate protectors of their civilization. The enslaving collars perverted that partnership, turning it into a tool of oppression. But without the collar's interference, Zara's natural healing abilities were slowly repairing the damage from her escape and crash landing. As Jake watched the fascinating repair process, he heard something that made his blood run cold. The sound of the alien ships had changed. Instead of the constant circling, there were now periodic intervals of silence, followed by mechanical, grinding noises. They're not just waiting up there, Jake realized. They're calling for reinforcements, or bringing down mining equipment. Zara's eyes widened with alarm. She projected an image that showed massive drilling machines capable of boring through solid rock. If the aliens had access to that kind of equipment, nowhere in the mine would be safe for long. But Jake had an idea. These old mines are connected to natural cave systems that go for miles underground. Some of them connect to other mining complexes on the far side of the mountain range. If we can reach one of those exit points, we might be able to get back to my garage and the equipment I need to really help you. Jake pulled out his smartphone and showed Zara the GPS mapping app he used for hiking. The device couldn't get a signal this deep underground, but it still had the offline map stored in memory. Jake traced the route they would need to take through abandoned tunnels and natural caves to reach the old copper mine 15 miles away. Zara studied the map carefully, her enhanced intelligence quickly understanding the route Jake had planned. She nodded agreement, but Jake could see exhaustion in her ancient eyes. The constant use of her abilities to share memories and communicate was draining her remaining strength. "Rest for now," Jake said. "Let your systems finish the emergency repairs. We'll move out in a few hours when you're stronger." As Zara settled down beside the underground lake to recuperate, Jake explored their temporary hideout more thoroughly. The natural cavern was larger than he'd first thought, with interesting mineral formations that suggested it had been shaped by more than just water over the centuries. In one corner, Jake found something that made him pause. Carved into the rock wall were symbols that looked remarkably similar to the writing he'd seen on Zara's collar. They were old, worn by time and water, but unmistakably the same alien script. "Zara," Jake called softly, "you need to see this." The dragon approached the wall carvings with obvious surprise. She studied the symbols intently, then projected a flood of images that left Jake's head spinning. The carvings were incredibly old, dating back thousands of years to a time when Zara's people had explored this part of the galaxy. Earth had been surveyed long ago as a potential refuge world, a place where dragons could retreat if their homeworld was ever threatened. The symbols were a message left by advanced scouts who had prepared hidden supply caches throughout the planet's cave systems. "There are supply caches here?" Jake asked excitedly. "With dragon technology?" Zara nodded, but her expression was uncertain. The caches would be thousands of years old, and there was no guarantee they would still be functional. Still, it was worth investigating. If they could find working dragon technology, it might give them the edge they needed to fight back against Zara's pursuers. Following the directions carved into the wall, Jake and Zara explored deeper into the natural cave system. They found the first cache hidden behind a rockfall that looked natural, but had clearly been arranged to conceal the entrance. Inside was a chamber lined with the same shimmering metal as Zara's scales. Despite thousands of years of age, the room was perfectly preserved, protected by some kind of stasis field that had kept the contents in perfect condition. Jake's flashlight revealed racks of equipment that looked like a cross between medieval armor and advanced technology. There were weapons, tools, and what looked like medical devices designed specifically for treating dragon physiology. Most importantly, there were communication devices that could potentially reach other free dragons, if any still existed. Zara immediately moved to one of the medical stations and began using devices Jake couldn't even identify. Blue energy flowed between the equipment and the dragon's injured body, accelerating her healing process dramatically. Within minutes, her wounds were closing and her natural glow was returning to full strength. "Now we're getting somewhere," Jake said with satisfaction. "How do you feel?" Zara turned to face him, and Jake could see that she was transformed. The pain and exhaustion were gone, replaced by fierce determination and renewed strength. This was what a war dragon looked like when operating at full capacity. Magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. But their moment of triumph was interrupted by a new sound echoing through the tunnels. The grinding of massive drilling machines, getting closer with each passing minute. The aliens had brought excavation equipment and were boring their way down toward the cavern where Jake and Zara had been hiding. Worse, Jake could hear the whine of energy weapons accompanying the drilling sounds. The aliens weren't just trying to reach them. They were systematically destroying the tunnel system to prevent escape. "Time to go," Jake said, grabbing what supplies he could carry from the cache. Zara nodded grimly. She had found what looked like a portable communication device, and was strapping it to her back along with several weapons that integrated seamlessly with her technological implants. They left the cache through one of the deeper tunnels, following the underground stream that connected to the broader cave network. Behind them, the sound of alien excavation grew steadily louder. Whatever machines they were using, they were cutting through solid rock like it was soft clay. As they moved through the twisting passages, Jake couldn't help but feel a growing sense of urgency. The aliens weren't just trying to recapture one escaped dragon anymore. Their aggressive tactics suggested they were trying to eliminate a threat before it could grow larger. That meant other free dragons might already be responding to Zara's escape. The rebellion she represented might already be beginning, somewhere among the stars. But first, they had to survive long enough to make contact with potential allies. And that meant staying ahead of the hunters who were closing in fast. The underground river led them through a maze of natural caves that seemed to go on forever. Jake's flashlight batteries were running low, but Zara's scales provided enough blue luminescence to light their way. The dragon moved with renewed strength and purpose, her enhanced senses guiding them through passages too narrow for the alien drilling machines to follow. After what felt like hours of crawling through tight spaces and wading through underground streams, they finally emerged from a hidden cave mouth on the far side of the mountain range. Jake's GPS confirmed they were only 2 miles from the old copper mine he'd marked on the map. Dawn was breaking over the desert, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. In the distance, Jake could see smoke rising from the direction of his garage. The aliens had found his home and destroyed it, probably hoping to eliminate any evidence of their presence on Earth. "I'm sorry about your home," Zara said, speaking aloud for the first time since Jake had freed her. Jake spun around in shock. Zara's voice was like music mixed with the sound of distant thunder, definitely feminine, but with harmonics that no human throat could produce. "You can speak English?" Jake asked. "The communication device from the cache includes translation protocols," Zara explained. "Your language was in its database, along with several thousand others. My people were thorough when they surveyed this world." Jake felt a mix of wonder and loss as he looked back toward his destroyed garage. Everything he'd built over the years was gone, but somehow that seemed less important now than it had yesterday. His old life had ended the moment he decided to help an injured dragon, and there was no going back. "What do we do now?" he asked. Zara activated the communication device she'd taken from the cache. Immediately, streams of data began flowing across a holographic display that materialized in the air between them. Jake couldn't read the alien symbols, but Zara's expression grew increasingly hopeful as she monitored the transmissions. "There are others," she said excitedly. "Other dragons who managed to break free from their collars. They've been hiding, waiting for a signal to begin the resistance. My escape has given them hope." The communication device showed a star map with dozens of highlighted points scattered across the galaxy. Each one represented a dragon who had somehow managed to resist or escape their enslavement. Some were individuals like Zara who had broken free during battles. Others were small groups that had found ways to shield their minds from the collar's control. But they were scattered and isolated, unable to coordinate their efforts without risking detection by the enslaver fleet. "We need to reach them," Zara continued. "With enough free dragons working together, we can disable the collars on the others and liberate our people." "How do we get off Earth?" Jake asked practically. "Your ship crashed, and I'm guessing those alien vessels up there aren't going to give us a ride." Zara's expression turned thoughtful. The cache contained more than just medical supplies and weapons. There were also ship components, parts for emergency vehicles designed to help stranded dragons return to space. But they would need to be assembled, and we would need a power source capable of reaching escape velocity. Jake's mechanical mind immediately started working on the problem. What kind of power requirements are we talking about? And how big would the ship need to be? Zara projected specifications into his mind, showing him blueprints for a sleek spacecraft about the size of a small jet. The power requirements were enormous by human standards, but Jake recognized several principles that were similar to rocket technology he'd studied in technical school. The fusion core from the cache could provide the necessary power, Zara explained, but it would need to be connected to a propulsion system designed for atmospheric escape. Your people's rockets use chemical combustion, inefficient but functional for short-range applications. "Wait," Jake said as an idea formed. "What about combining both technologies? Use the fusion core to power a hybrid propulsion system that starts with rocket principles but transitions to your energy-based system once we clear the atmosphere." Zara's eyes lit up with interest. "That could work. Your knowledge of mechanical systems combined with dragon technology? Yes, it's possible. But they couldn't build a spacecraft out in the open desert with alien ships still hunting them. They needed a secure location with the tools and materials necessary for such an ambitious project." Jake thought about all the places he knew in the desert, all the abandoned facilities and hidden locations where a person could work without being discovered. Then he remembered the old military testing site about 50 miles north of his garage. It had been closed for 20 years, but the underground bunkers and workshops might still be intact. "I know where we can go," he told Zara, "but we'll have to travel during daylight, and those ships are still looking for us." "Let them look," Zara said with newfound confidence. "I have my strength back and weapons from the cache. If they want to fight, I'm ready to give them one." They set off across the desert, staying low among the rocky formations and dry washes that provided cover from aerial surveillance. Zara could have flown, but that would have made them visible for miles. Instead, she used her enhanced senses to guide them along routes that avoided open ground. It didn't take long for the alien ships to find them. Jake heard the familiar engine whine first, growing louder as 3 of the sleek vessels approached from the north. They were flying in formation, scanning the ground with energy beams that left glowing traces in the sand. "They've upgraded their search pattern," Zara observed. "Those beams will detect us, even behind cover." "Can you fight them?" Jake asked. "Watch and learn," Zara replied with a fierce smile that showed teeth like crystalline daggers. Zara stepped out from behind a rocky outcropping where they'd been hiding, making herself a clear target for the approaching ships. Jake wanted to call her back, but she moved with such confidence that he found himself trusting her judgment. The lead ship immediately opened fire, sending bolts of crimson energy searing through the air where Zara had been standing. But she was no longer there. The dragon had launched herself into the air with impossible speed, her wings catching currents that shouldn't have existed in the still desert air. What followed was like watching a dance of death performed at impossible speeds. Zara moved through 3-dimensional space with fluid grace, dodging energy blasts while closing the distance to her attackers. The weapons she'd taken from the cache integrated seamlessly with her natural abilities, allowing her to return fire with devastating accuracy. The first ship went down in a ball of flame when Zara's energy beam punched through its hull and ignited something vital. The pilot tried to eject, but Zara was there to intercept the escape pod with a burst of blue fire that left no survivors. The second ship tried to retreat, but Zara was faster. She caught it in a climbing turn and tore through its engine section with claws that glowed white-hot. The ship tumbled from the sky and exploded against the desert floor. The third ship's pilot was either braver or more desperate than his companions. Instead of fleeing, he accelerated directly toward Zara in what was clearly a suicide run. Jake held his breath as Dragon and ship hurtled toward each other on a collision course. At the last possible second, Zara folded her wings and dropped like a stone, letting the ship pass harmlessly overhead. Then, she spun in midair and sent a concentrated beam of energy into the ship's reactor core. The explosion was so bright Jake had to shield his eyes, and when he looked again, there was nothing left but glowing debris raining down on the sand. Zara landed gracefully beside Jake, not even breathing hard from the aerial combat. "That was incredible," Jake said. "I had no idea dragons could fight like that." "We are weapons of war," Zara replied matter-of-factly, "created and enhanced specifically for combat. The tragedy is that we were meant to protect, not conquer." They continued toward the old military facility, but Jake noticed that Zara seemed troubled despite their victory. When he asked about it, she showed him more images from the communication device. The destruction of the 3 ships had been detected by the main fleet. More vessels were already en route to Earth, including a massive command ship that carried specialized equipment for recapturing escaped dragons. Worse, the fleet commanders had decided that Earth itself was now a security threat that needed to be eliminated. "They're going to destroy your world," Zara said sadly. "Not just to recapture me, but to ensure that no evidence of their activities remains. Billions of innocent people will die because I led them here." Jake stopped walking and turned to face the dragon directly. "That's not your fault. You were escaping slavery. The blame lies with whoever decided that enslaving dragons was a good idea in the first place." "Perhaps," Zara said, "but the result is the same. Unless we can stop them." "Then we stop them," Jake said simply. "How long do we have?" "The command ship will arrive in approximately 18 of your hours," Zara replied, after consulting the communication device. "The planet-killer weapon it carries will need another 6 hours to charge and achieve optimal firing position. 24 hours to build a spacecraft and somehow convince a fleet of alien warships to abandon their plan to destroy Earth." It seemed impossible, but Jake had spent his entire career solving impossible problems with creative applications and mechanical principles. "Let's get to that military base," he said. "Time to build something that's never been built before." The old facility was in better condition than Jake had hoped. The underground workshops still had power from geothermal generators that had been built to last decades without maintenance. More importantly, there were stockpiles of advanced materials and manufacturing equipment that the military had been experimenting with before the base was decommissioned. Zara unpacked the ship components from the cache, while Jake surveyed the available resources. The fusion core was about the size of a basketball, but weighed almost nothing, a sphere of crystalline material that pulsed with contained energy. The other components were equally advanced, designed to be assembled by dragon claws rather than human hands. But Jake had always been good at adapting tools for unexpected purposes. Working together, they began assembling a hybrid spacecraft that combined the best features of both technologies. Jake handled the mechanical engineering, while Zara integrated the dragon components and configured the control systems. It was the most complex project either of them had ever attempted, but somehow their different skills complemented each other perfectly. As they worked, the communication device continued monitoring transmissions from the approaching fleet. The news was increasingly grim. The command ship was massive, easily large enough to carry hundreds of enslaved dragons, and the equipment needed to strip mine entire worlds. Its arrival would mean the end of any hope for escape. But Jake noticed something interesting in the technical specifications Zara shared with him. The command ship's primary weapon was designed to crack planetary crusts and trigger massive volcanic eruptions. It was incredibly powerful, but it had a significant weakness. It required precise orbital positioning and several hours of charging time. What if we don't try to fight the whole fleet? Jake suggested as he calibrated the hybrid propulsion system. What if we just focus on stopping the planet killer? Zara paused in her work on the navigation systems. You're suggesting we attack a ship that's over 2 miles long with a vessel we're building in a garage. I'm suggesting we use the communication device to coordinate with all those other free dragons, Jake replied. If they could converge on this system at the right time, we might be able to create enough of a distraction to get close to the command ship. Zara's expression shifted from skepticism to growing excitement as she understood Jake's plan. A coordinated rebellion, using my escape as the rallying point. If we could disable the command ship's weapon, the fleet would be forced to retreat rather than risk losing their most powerful asset, Jake finished. Earth survives, you get your revolution, and everybody wins except the slavers. They sent out coded messages to every free dragon on the communication network, sharing their location and the timing of the planned attack. The responses came back quickly. Dragons across the galaxy were ready to risk everything for a chance at freedom. With 6 hours remaining before the command ship reached firing position, Jake and Zara completed their improvised spacecraft and prepared for launch. The vessel was unlike anything that had ever flown, a fusion of human engineering and dragon technology that looked impossible but tested perfectly in their simulations. As they strapped themselves into the jury-rigged control seats, Jake felt a mixture of terror and exhilaration unlike anything he'd ever experienced. 24 hours ago, he'd been a small-town mechanic with a quiet life fixing trucks and farm equipment. Now he was about to pilot an experimental spacecraft into battle against an alien fleet to save his entire world. Ready? Zara asked, her clawed hands dancing over the dragon control systems. Let's go save the universe, Jake replied, engaging the hybrid engines. The spacecraft shot from the underground hangar like a bullet, accelerating so rapidly that Jake's vision grayed at the edges despite the inertial dampeners. Within minutes, they had cleared Earth's atmosphere and were approaching the orbital battleground where the fate of 2 worlds would be decided. In the distance, Jake could see the command ship positioning itself for the killing shot. But he could also see dozens of smaller ships converging from all directions, free dragons answering the call to rebellion. The final battle was about to begin.